So welcome everyone, I'm Nat from Exceptional Individuals, and we mainly support people who are neurodivergent, so things like dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD, but essentially this workshop would help anyone today. So no matter how your brain thinks or works, hopefully it'd be beneficial. And some of the points are going to be ridiculously simple. You're like, well, duh. But other points you probably may have not heard about. But one little thing I'd like to say at the beginning is that when it comes to CVs, and it's going to get really confusing and you'll have no idea what you're doing. Lucy says, is it being recorded? Yes, it is. And it's being recorded, so we'll be able to watch it back at the end. So if you're like me and dyslexic and don't really like making notes, you'll be able to watch back.
So will we get a copy of the recording?
Yes, so it'll be uploaded to YouTube either later today or probably tomorrow. Well, I'm going to share my screen now. And thumbs up if you can see my screen. Okay, cool. That's nice. And just so you know, if any of you have no idea what we do, we help companies recruit diverse talent, so people who think differently. So these companies aren't doing it because they feel sorry for us. They're doing it because they actually want people who think different. And that's the beauty of it. Now, if I can also mention, if you all can put yourself on mute unless you want to ask a question, just because it stops interference. We also support neurodiverse job seekers. So if any of you are currently looking for support, you can come see us for free because we are a social enterprise. So we work, so businesses will pay, individuals get it for free. Everyone's happy. We do assessments, guides, drop-in centers. And the best selling point is our lovely team in the background. At least 80% of us are all neurodiverse. So myself included, I have dyslexia and dyspraxia. And we've also got lovely April in the chat, who is one of our great volunteers. So first of all, this is going to be about going through some points you'll probably know, some points you probably don't know, and some points which you're not really sure what I'm even talking about. But to give you a background, I have been helping people with CVs for a long time now. Like I worked at the Prince's Trust, different job agencies, and we support people who are applying for jobs every single day. And also have worked very closely with hiring managers and HR across the country and across the world. From what you've told me, most people here are from the UK today, but if any of you are from outside, do let me know because there's some slight differences. So on this map, all you need to do on your phone is pinpoint where you are in the UK. And if you're not in the UK, put yourself in the ocean somewhere, just so I know. Okay, wow. So we've got mostly the UK. I know there was someone who said they were from Dundee. Okay, great. So most of this will appeal to you. And the reason why it's important to know is, we got Germany. Brilliant. So why it's important to know this is that in the EU and in the US, the format of CVs can vary ever so slightly. But I'll hopefully make that aware if that becomes the case. Oh, okay, from the US, so that's interesting to know. So first of all, I want you guys to rank, what do you think is the most embarrassing email address? So it's a bit small. Oh, it is very small. But if you can see on your phones, it will tell you. And this is super important because we have all, at one point or a time, had email addresses which are super embarrassing or that we completely regret in hindsight. So a lot of you have said that. Now, fun fact is the one that was Crazy Boy Nat with a K and an I was actually my one. And the one about Little Miss Naughty, which is hilarious that you rated the most embarrassing, was actually our colleague Siobhan's email address. So these are actual real ones. And we have people applying for jobs with the most ridiculous email addresses. One was like, lazyboy999. Yeah, like you're going to get a job. Or any other random ones. But one thing I would like to say is if you have a @hotmail.com, they can look a little bit unprofessional. So if you have one of them, it's not a big deal, but you might want to consider changing it to a Gmail or a Yahoo, something which has a bit of a better reputation. Another thing is if any of you have an email address with your date of birth, remove that, because there is such a thing as age discrimination, and people definitely will look at that. So what you want to do is give them the least reasons to discriminate as possible to give you the best foot in the door. Next one, and I know one of you already mentioned this, what type of photo, if any, should you include on a CV? So should you have one where you're a bit enthusiastic, showing a bit of character? Should you have just a light smile, or a duck face? Well, I can assure you it's definitely not the duck face, but what about any of the others? And you'll notice a lot of creatives will normally put a photo on their CV. And yeah, it might depend on what you're applying for. So if you're applying for an acting role, obviously you're going to need a photo. But if we're talking about the standard job, it's far better not to. And the reason why is, again, it comes down to discrimination, because like it or not, people do judge people based on what they look like. I wish it wasn't the case, but people do. So by getting rid of the photo, you're eliminating the first kind of blockade. There is even an argument that you shouldn't even put your name on CVs. Now, that's not a common practice, by the way. Just some organizations will say that, but rule out 9 out of 10, you should. Now, if you're in the EU or the US, it can be quite common to have a photo. So definitely do check where you're applying for roles. But in the UK, at least, it's not common practice to have a photo. And having a photo can, unfortunately, discriminate you. So if you have any pictures, feel free to ask. Now, Lucy says, I think I only had a pic on an application that asked, otherwise never. Exactly. If they ask, obviously you need to put one, but I would avoid it. Because, for instance, they might think, oh, you look a bit too young for this job, or, oh, you're a bit older. You know, even if they're trained professionals, and under the Equality Act 2010, it says you are not allowed to discriminate. You know, the world isn't as nice as we'd like it to be. And feel free to disagree with any of my points, by the way. As I mentioned at the start, these are all, it's each to their own. There's no one perfect formula. So here is, should you include a reference on your CV? Yes or no? And I know a lot of people are like torn about this. Should I put one on or not? Let's see. Okay, well, on this one, so Peter said no, need to protect referees. And I said, indeed, in Germany, we're expected, although not officially obliged, to provide both a photo and the date of birth. I prefer the British way. No, absolutely. So why should we have a reference? So Lucy said reference available on request. I don't have space left, haha. Just put available on request. So something yes, something's no. Well, I think our opinion typically is no. And the reason why no is because if you put a reference on the CV, someone can contact the reference without your say-so at the beginning, and it could catch your referee off guard. By asking them, by getting them to contact you and for you to then give them the reference, you have time to, you know, call up your referee, tell them what to expect, and let them know the type of job you're applying for. So it gives you far more control on what your referee might be saying about you. Now, to the point, just put reference on request. I'm under the opinion that, quite frankly, it's a bit of redundant. You know, it's kind of, if the employer wants a reference, they're going to get a reference, whether or not you have it on the paper or not. You can put it on if you want just the convention, but if you're pushed for space, it really isn't needed. I don't think it adds too much to the discussion. Yeah, it's definitely not a good idea to surprise your referee. All right, this one, which is again controversial in the world of CVs, how many pages should the ideal CV be? So is it one page, a page and double-sided, 2 pages, or 2 pages but reversed? Now, obviously, for this, I'm referring to printed out ones, but with digital, it doesn't really make a difference if it's reversed or not. Now, I wouldn't personally, I wouldn't put 8 pages. I think if you see here, most people have put 1 page, and yes, 1 page is the best. Because let's face it, employers might get, I don't know, they might get hundreds of CVs. You know, they will get loads. And I can guarantee you, as someone who has employed people, I do not read the entire CV. I will look at it for probably about 2 seconds before I've decided whether to put it in a pile or not. If you are giving out an old-fashioned paper CV, which they still are used, I would recommend doing it. If your page is 2 pages, put them on 2 pages and a staple. Why? Because people know to lift up the paper and read it. If it's double-sided, quite often people just don't even bother looking at it. They just assume it's blank. And yeah, Lucy says, save as a PDF. I think PDF is definitely the best format because PDF can be viewed on any platform, be it PC or Mac, and it should look identical. And Peter said he thought only machines check out CVs. It depends on the firm. For the big Fortune 500 companies with thousands of staff, it's very common. But even still, it's still a lot is done by hand. And ultimately, it will be seen by a person eventually, depending how far you get down the line. Okay, that GIF was giving me a bit of a seizure. What font would you choose for a CV? Now, you might look at these fonts and be like, nah, they all look exactly the same. It makes no difference. Well, there is some subtle difference, and I will tell you in a moment. So Rebecca said, now, what is it about a CV that makes you want to continue reading? Quite frankly, it's readability. If I look at something and I can look at it really quickly and get the information I need and go, I will give it the time of the day. If, however, it's kind of really condensed and bulky, I will not. I've often seen CVs of like people who are researchers or academics, and no offense, but their CVs are some of the worst I've seen, just because it's just not readable. I can't get what I need quickly. Let's have a quick look at what you're saying. Sean says, can you please add a slide with the correct responses for future workshops, please? Help with retention and correct with what is being said. Well, this is being recorded, so you will be able to see it back second. But the reason why I didn't do a correct one is it really is an opinion. There isn't a correct one, but these are just potential ones that we found that have worked quite well. And to Rebecca, I do not have an example right now, but it is something I will be able to send. So with these fonts, right, the reason why Impact, I'm glad no one picked, it's bulky, it's in your face, it looks cartoony, you might as well have used Comic Sans, it's not happening. Option 3 is Times New Roman, I believe, and that is actually a bad font to use. Why? Because it has been overused. You know, if you look at, you asked Rebecca, like, what makes a CV stand out? Apart from being easy to read, the font plays a big part. If you see the same font day in, day in, your brain is programmed to just forget about it. But it also can't be a crazy font. So a font like, Jill Sands or Garand, the first one, is probably a really good one because it's not quite Times New Roman. It's a little bit different, which gives it the edge from other CVs, which might be just enough to make it a bit more appealing to the viewer, but not so different that people think you're a lunatic. So Nat has said, I also use Arial. That's not me. All right, so 1,000 words max per CV. And this is important, okay? 1,000 isn't actually that many when you start writing your CV, but some people think, you said do it on 1 page. So I did it all on 1 page, and the text is really small. You want to limit it. Even if you've had a job for like 20 years and you've got so much to say, think of your CV as a best of, not an entire reference. Use LinkedIn if you want to write an essay on your achievements, but your CV should only be the most relevant things for the jobs that you're applying for. Also, Rachel asked, what font did I recommend? I recommended a font which is easy to read, but isn't your standard. Avoid things like Times New Roman or Arial, things that have been overdone, because you want it to stand out to the eyes. So subtle, but a little bit different. And yeah, Charlotte just checked. 943, nice, just got in there. So the next one is measurable results. And this is one which a lot of you may not actually have. And honestly, this is by far one of the biggest things I can recommend. So on your phones, if you have them available, you will see a few examples. If you can, please write them down for us to share. So what is a measurable result? It's that rather than just saying, I'm good on Microsoft, okay, brilliant. But if you say something, I have worked on Microsoft for the past 6 years, managing an account of 6 million US dollars. Wow, that's got some weight to it. So promoted within 6 months, brilliant. Not just saying promoted, because if you were promoted after 20 years, no one's going to be that impressed. But after 6 months, yes. So always have something to back up your point. Make it personal. One of the biggest mistakes I always see on CVs is they could be anyone's. Like, imagine you got a CV saying, I'm a confident, outgoing team player. And you're like, well, I could have that CV. Lucy could have that CV. Zach could have that CV. It honestly could belong to anyone. You want to make a CV which only works for you. So I'm guessing that was April. Volunteered for exceptional individuals for 2 years. And for me, I'm saying, I have supported X number of people get into positions which has resulted in X amount of productivity increase. So try and put as many examples as you absolutely can. Rebecca said one of the problems is that we have a track record of underperforming. But remember, you can make anything into a stat. It doesn't have to, you can kind of think outside of the box. But the human brain loves numbers on the whole. So if you have a number in your CV, when you're scanning, it will be the thing that you point out. So even though when you're writing in, academic English, what you typically do is write 2 as TWO, but on a CV, I typically would actually put the number 2 because the brain finds that a lot easier to read. So first of all, out of all of you, what is the highest career level you have held? Are you a graduate, entry level, supervisor, manager, director, CEO? And this isn't just so you can show off. This is because quite often people apply for roles which they do not have the experience for. Now remember, this experience only matters if it's on the CV. So remember, if you're a graduate, there's no point applying for a role as a director, or you're not going to get it. Or say if you are a manager, no, you are a manager, but all your positions on your CV doesn't specify that you've held a managing position or you've managed people or you've supervised a project, it's not going to work. I think Peter mentioned about computers, and they do look for keywords. So get the job description and make sure that all the keywords are also in your CV. Because there's 2 things. First of all, you've got to get through the magic computer. Then the second thing is you've got to stand out to the actual person who views it. And Sarah says, does volunteer positions count? Absolutely. Nowhere on your CV does it say, I got paid for this. You can absolutely put voluntary. To be honest, some of my voluntary positions are way more impressive than any of my paid positions. It counts. It's still work at the end of the day. It's still skills. This one is buzzwords. Now, for those of you who do not know, a buzzword is a word that everyone uses. So for a time being, everyone was saying words like synergy. I'm an ambitious, goal-driven, influential trailblazer. So these words, feel free to write them out on Menti or also on the chat. But what are some really cheesy buzzwords that everyone uses in CVs? So we've got driven, motivated, dynamic, passionate, energetic, proficient. Now, these words, when people are creating a CV, this is what they think of. They always think, oh, I definitely got to get these words in, but they're terrible. Everyone uses them. They're not authentic. When I see these words, I just think, ignore them. I want words that are unique to you. Remember what I said, a CV has to be good for you. If you gave your CV to someone else and they pretended to be you, like a lot of you are pretending to be me in this chat, think about it, like, would it make sense? And if it would make sense for you, then that CV isn't personalized enough. It needs to be so unique to you that no one else would be able to pretend to be you, because the experience on the CV just wouldn't correlate to what's on it. Yeah, and we said, in my impression, neurodiverse individuals often have really impressive experience in volunteering or freelance work, so it's crucial. While we're on the subject, one of you mentioned about career gaps, and I want to redefine what we mean by work. What do we mean? Work doesn't have to be paid. It doesn't even have to be volunteering. It could be, for instance, maybe you were a carer and you cared for someone for several years. It could be that you kind of did community work. You did litter picking in your spare time. You helped raise children. Like, these are jobs because they give you experience. A job doesn't have to be something which someone says, here's a job. It could be what you do on a day-to-day basis. So for example, on the weekends, I do a lot of DIY and carpentry. And if I was applying for a job in that field, though I haven't had it in a official capacity, it still is experience. And you can definitely put passions on there. So think of it that way. A job doesn't have to be your 9 till 5. And this is why when someone says, I haven't had a job in like 4 years, you've definitely done something in the last 4 years. Think about it. What have you done which is a gift or a skill or beneficial to someone in some way or form? We sometimes work with people with criminal records and they say, oh, I've been away for quite some time. And I'm saying, well, what did you do in prison? What courses did you do? Did you do any kind of contributing work? You don't need to tell them the whole details. It's not lying. You're just saying the facts. I supported in the kitchens. That's still a job. So anyway, I'm really enthusiastic about that. No one has not done anything. And Peter says, how do self-employed look on a CV? Absolutely. Self-employed is anything that you've been paid for. So some people might have done like cleaning and, the odd job here or there. That still counts. Now, again, a lot of the things is on CVs, you don't have to put the exact date. You can say January to December or this year to that year, even if it was like a little bit here and there. So I've done work. I work on one job, 1 day a month, every month, but I've done that for like 5 years, still counts. But on that, for those of you who might not have as concrete physical jobs, soft skills are really important. So soft skills are anything that you can't touch. So it could be, being a good communicator, good at teamwork, problem solving. So on this, if you're able to, you just got to drag the little thing and say how good you would rate yourself, I think out of 5 on each of these. So would you say you're really great at leadership or not so good at being creative? So Rachel said, we don't use dates anymore and just say worked for 2 years, etc. Surely gaps wouldn't be obvious. Yeah, I really don't think you need to. Again, why do we put dates on CVs? We do it so we can know what the person's been up to and we want to make sure they're reliable. I only put years. I do not bother putting exact dates. Shauna has said, one of my strengths is being future thinking and inspiring people and orgs to do something meaningful around climate and social justice. Not sure how to captivate this on a CV though. That's a really good one. You could put like climate activist. And again, that is a job. It is a job which you are skilled in, which people potentially would pay you for. So, I mean, I would put climate activist or change maker, or even though that's a bit of a buzzword, or sustainable development promoter. So there's so many different ways you can word things which still make it look credible, and it is a skill. So remember, I'm never telling any of you to lie on a CV, but just think outside of the box in terms of how you want to get it across. So this is really interesting. As a group, we're very creative, we're great problem solving, we've also got really good attention to detail. You might even think that some of us might be neurodiverse, eh? No, these are really typical skills. And these are things that you need to put on the CV. Because again, I don't really care if you've worked in admin, I don't care if you've worked in hospitality, I care about the skills that you've got and the skills you can bring to my role. Because let's face it, what you've learned in that job isn't going to work in my job. I'm going to have to retrain you anyway. And that's the thing at universities, brilliant. You've got a degree in radio presenting. Well, what you learn and how we do it is going to be completely different. I want to know that you have transferable skills. So this is really good. And the next one is hard skills. So these are physical things. Now, these were only some that I picked out. Now, all of these skills here are apparently the most sought after physical skills at this moment. So we've got a few here. Peter says, should I say aspires on my form? So basically, should you say you are neurodiverse? Personally, no. And the reason is because I am proud to be neurodiverse. I will tell people I'm neurodiverse, but we've got to be honest, people's knowledge and understanding is so small. If you tell someone you're dyslexic, and if they're not very well informed on the area, they are going to think, oh, okay, this person can't read or write. Well, we know that is not dyslexia, but they may not. So it's far better to scope the organization out, in interview, get a lay of the land and find out how much do they know, and then you are able to educate them. But what you can do is all the skills that are associated with having ASD or dyslexia or ADHD, you can put those skills on. So like we said in the last one, creative, problem solving, but try and think of a better way of wording it that isn't so cliche. So Rebecca has said, hi Nat, great advice, thanks. RE voluntary work, I'm doing analysis and writing reports in my own time to gain skills, but I don't have a measurable result for this work because it's not influencing anyone and no one is making any decisions based on it. How would I spin this to my advantage? Well, in terms of that, it's an interesting question, voluntary work. How would I do analysis and writing reports? Just talk about what you're analysing, and you could even do some facts. So for instance, maybe you're doing one on like climate change, and you can say, due to 80% of the world being underwater in 2055, I had decided to do an analysis on blah, blah, blah. So even though the number or the measurable result isn't directly yours, it's still a number which gets the eyes to focus on it, and then the interviewer will read that sentence at least. So it's a bit of a workaround. And Rachel has also asked about how would you inform an employer around neurodiversity? I don't like using labels. I prefer using skill sets. So remember, always come from a positive point of view. Do not tell them what you can't do. Tell them what you can do and what you need in order to succeed. And that, always give a solution and never give a problem. And Ruth has said, what about if you have a long gap without work? Like I said, think about what have you been doing in that time? Have you been a carer? Have you looked after children? Have you done volunteering? There'll be something you have done which you'll be able to accumulate. So this is really cool. So most of you can use Microsoft Office, administration, these are good. Now, if any of you are in the process of looking for work or love learning, these ones, anything on a computer is gold dust at the moment. So I honestly can't recommend enough that you're spending time in learning these. Okay, we're doing really well. Okay, here's some bonus tips. If you do have A to C in GCSEs in maths and English, it's good to put that on there because that's essentially the only grade people care about. Degrees, great. Masters, great. There's no point putting your education. So in terms of like, oh, this is the secondary school I went to. These are all the grades I got. No one cares. If you're applying for a job, I expect you to, I don't care if you've got a B in PE or RE or any of those subjects. So you only need to put maths and English. Yeah. So Lucy said grades are irrelevant at 43. Exactly. Even at 25 or 20, like your grades are irrelevant. They say after 3 or 5 years of your degree, it's worthless anyway. And I don't want to depress you guys who have debt like me. But it's not so important. But if the job says requires an A to C in X subject, make sure it's on the CV. So once again, if you have a degree, no point putting your college on there. If you've been to college, no point putting your secondary school on there. You only need to put the most highest level of education you've achieved, because otherwise you're just wasting space. So keep it to the point. So Jade says, I have 3 degrees. I would say put all 3 degrees on there because that's impressive because they're all the same level. No, do put 3 degrees on there. So if you don't finish your degree, which is quite common, unfortunately, that doesn't have to be a bad thing. You can still talk about the modules you learned. So you can say from this date to this date, I studied this. You don't have to put like oh, I got a bachelor's, you can still talk about the subject you did. And again, it's still skill sets. So it doesn't matter. Education doesn't have to be in a formal establishment. It just has to be something you've learned. So it could be that you've done some online courses. It could be that you've attended like one training course every single month for the past 2 years. Okay, so the next one is add section headings. So work experience, education, make it really clear to scan information. When you're reading, you want to be able to pick out straight away. You do not want someone to hunt for the information. Another thing is consistency. So depending how you put your dates, if you're choosing to put dates, just make sure you're using the same font, make sure you use the same format. Otherwise, it looks sloppy and they think you didn't try that hard. Since I'm coming from the US, I have a high school diploma. I have difficult translating it to UK applications. That's a really good point. If you have a foreign application, I would do your own conversion if possible. So you might say, I studied at this college, equivalent to X UK grade. So try and do the equivalents. Do not give the employer any reason to have to think more than they have to, because they'll just think, you know. And again, even NVQs, you know, they are good qualifications. I'm not taking away from that, but people do not know what they mean. And with the new GCSE standard, they no longer do ABC. I believe they do like 1 to 8, you know, up numbers. So do a conversion so people understand. Is it worth using software like Canva to make a CV really stand out? Laura, great question. If you're applying for a role which is a creative position, absolutely. If it's in a format which is difficult to read, it may automatically filter you out of the position. So don't get me wrong, I love creative CVs, I love them, but they actually can put you at a disadvantage due to how CVs automatically scan. So always do it in a format which is, if we're getting really technical, a PDF where you can highlight the text because then it can read. If it's a PDF where the image is like flat and you can't highlight it, that's not particularly good because the computer can struggle. Yeah, so Shana says, I recently had my CV slated by an agency as it was in PDF and they showed me how little got picked up by the machines. If you can submit in Word, Word is a very good format as well because they can nearly always read it. So next steps, we've got a CV checker on our website, which I'll show you how to get to in a moment. You can send your CV to us if you'd like us to have a look over it. Now, I can't promise we can look at all of them because, you know, there's a lot of you, but if we are able to, we'll do our best. So no promises, but we'll try. You can also book a session with us with a job advisor. So as long as you're neurodiverse, doesn't matter where you are welcome to have this, and it's a complete free service. Help and support begins. So this is how you go onto the free CV checker, and bear in mind you will have access to this later, but it's just on our website and you go looking for support and free CV checker. It's a very basic tool, but it goes through a lot of the points we mentioned today. And what we kindly ask, before you send us all your CVs, at least do this first. Go through it. And if you get 100% on this or close, then send it to us and we will critique it, you know, really well. But if we go through it and we realize that you've not followed any of this advice, you might not receive a reply because, you know, you've got to make it easy. The next one is how do you send your CV to us? So on our website, you just go to, again, candidates and send your CV. Nice and simple. You send a CV, you book a session, and your help begins. Couldn't be simpler. At the moment, there might be a bit of a waiting list, but it will tell you when the next available slot is. So this is just some ways you can reach out for help. Another way to get a coaching session. So we also have jobs online. Now, I see we have a few questions here, and I do have an opportunity to share at the end. So if any of you are looking for work, it might be useful to stick around. So Lucy said, how do you politely bring up a bad CV if you are shown someone else as an example? They think it's good, but it's crazy. Okay, so what I always say is, it's not for you to say something's good or bad. It's more about saying everyone has their own opinion of what makes a good CV. Some of the things I said today, you might disagree with, and you're very welcome to, but this is how I would do it. And this is how, from my experience, CVs done in this way have had the best results. So if you can get the individual to give their own feedback, they're far more likely to take it on than whether you just give it to them directly. Rachel, I'll always be conscious about using words as in a doc that they can be edited without your knowledge. Well, there is a setting in Word where you can actually make it a non-editable document. But personally, I typically use PDF because PDF was a format made by Adobe in 1993, fun fact. And it's done in a way which it can be read on all computers, because if you do it in a Word document or a Google Sheets or something like that, depending on the software used to read it, it can make the formatting look all bad. So you might spend ages making a CV look, well, beautiful, but once it's been, dragged through all different software, it looks really ugly, and they think that's a reflection on you, even though it looked great when you did it. Yeah, PDF's pretty much picked up. I think the thing I was looking for is OCR. So a PDF that has OCR built into it. So I believe that's optimal character recognition. And most can do that now, but that's just a thing which I would recommend. If you see that option, make sure it has OCR. And all that means is that you can highlight it, copy it, paste it. If you use reading software, it will read it back to you. It understands what the text is. Whereas a flat PDF basically is just an image, just a photo that is flat. If my colleague Rebecca, if you're in the chat, feel free to unmute yourself whenever you want.
Hi, Nat.
Oh, okay. So Rebecca, while a few more questions are coming in, do you want to just let people know about your opportunity? We're inclusive, but not that much.
So yes, our mentoring program, if you're interested in being a mentee, or even if you think you could be a mentor, if you just drop us an email, I'll pop my email address in the chat, and I can send you a link to sign up as either a mentee or a mentor. And the other thing I wanted to chat to you about was we've got 3 current vacancies with our corporate partners. So the first one is actually for a research analyst internship, which I think there was an analyst on the call earlier saying you've been working on analyst skills in your spare time. And that's with one of our partners called Unlimited. And they're really, really keen to get somebody in who doesn't necessarily have any analyst qualifications. They just really want someone who's interested and wants to learn on the job. So if you're interested in that, drop me an email as well. Again, I'll put my email in the chat. And the other vacancies that we have, the second one is with Aviva Insurance. They're actually looking for around 70 customer service experts. So if you think you would make a really, really great customer service person and be good in a customer service role, then that could be really, really great. And we have a good arrangement with Aviva that we can get reasonable adjustments for you. We can make sure that they understand all about neurodiversity, and they're one of our big inclusive employers. And the final one is a business intelligence developer with another insurance company called Convex, and they are looking for somebody who has got some experience in business intelligence, 2 to 3 years experience. So this is quite a high level role. So if you do think that you might be qualified for that, again, just drop me an email. I'm going to write my email address into the chat now. And any of those jobs that you're interested in, or if you want me to send you a list of them because you've not been able to take it in, because I realize I speak very fast, just drop me an email. I'll send all those over. And I think that is everything from me. The only other thing to say is on our one-to-one support, we are operating a wait list at the moment. It's on our website under the job coaching support page. And if you sign up for that, we definitely will be in touch. And we're working our way through that wait list at the moment.
Oh, amazing. And Rebecca, I saw a question. Can you be both a mentee and a mentor at the same time?
It's not something that we have done before, but I mean, if you'd like to, we're more than happy to have a conversation with you about it and sort of see if we think that can work out.
Brilliant, thanks. All right, guys, well, we've got a few more minutes. There's a few more questions. I'll do my absolute best to get through to them. And great to see a few familiar faces. And Lee, I remember speaking to you on the phone. Glad you could make it. So Lou says, I've been on this system. I haven't had a reply. I'm sorry. No, just to give you an idea why, we're really busy at the moment, but if you do not get a reply, always send an email, make it personal, and people will always reply far better, not just with us, but with any organization. People typically are feeling inundated at the moment. We definitely get manager roles. So we have roles in every type of industry. At the moment, we're working with partners like Universal, Man Group, Kantar, for Ryman's like a wide variety. Are the jobs sponsored or non-sponsored? Well, our partners will pay to get training by us, but the roles aren't sponsored, so we don't get paid for them. So we make sure that they are inclusive and they have all had training around neurodiversity. So that's the guarantee we're able to give. So for people that have very lengthy CVs, how do we cut this severely down? Well, I look at what's relevant, because some people are so wordy, and I just think, maybe use Twitter as an example. Can you fit what you're trying to say in a tweet? If you can, amazing. If you can't, get rid of it. If you've had like several jobs, remember, you do not have to include every job, only the jobs that are relevant. Or you don't have to include old jobs. If you've had jobs like, I don't know, 10 years ago of you delivering papers, not relevant, get rid of it. And you can always say at the bottom, for a detailed list of my jobs, please see, and have a link to your LinkedIn. I would find that's far more better than having all your jobs. Honestly, I only care about the first like 3 or 4 jobs, the things that are most relevant.
Nat, can I just hop in on the question from Kelly about the jobs?
Yeah, please do.
So you've asked if they're only in London or throughout the UK. The Aviva ones in particular are across the whole of the UK. I know they've got a number of roles going in, I think, every county at the moment, because they're hiring for about 74 people. For the other 2 jobs, the offices are London based. However, everybody is operating remotely at the moment. So, and I think it's definitely still an ongoing conversation. So I think if you want to apply for a role that's a remote role, but based in London, and you're not in London, that would definitely still be an option.
Thanks, Rebecca. And Rachel asks, how can I give an example of how to use buzzwords and convey soft skills? Well, again, avoid buzzwords, but do involve descriptive text. So rather than just saying, I supported 9 people, you might say, I empathetically supported 9 people, which resulted in increased motivation. So again, you're using a combination of a measurable result and descriptive words. Because if they're looking for someone who has high levels of empathy, well, the computers pick that up. And if they're also looking for visual demonstration that you're doing what you're saying, you've also got the numbers. So I always make sure that the descriptions are good and they're actually adding to what you're saying. If you use bullet points, I always do just 3 points. Do not overload it. Just keep it to the point. Remember, a CV is just to open the door. The interview is about getting in the door. So keep it brief. Make sure people want to read it. So Leah says, I took an IT course years ago, but software has changed. Is the IT experience still valid? Yes. So for that, that's more of a soft skill or rather than a hard skill. So rather saying, I learned how to use Windows XP, no one cares anymore. But what you can say is, I know how to use the developing technology. So I understand the principles of X technology. So for example, I'm qualified in Final Cut 7, which is an old editing platform. That's out of date now. But what I can say is I'm skilled in the techniques of digital video editing, which that becomes universal. It's not like limited by a timestamp. I think we're done. Well, I hope that was useful to a lot of you. And this is recorded, it will be posted. And remember, take my advice, take other advice, and ultimately, feel okay to say it's done, and a CV is an ongoing process. But my advice might not be the same as someone else's advice. You've got to make your own call at the end of the day. But these are definitely some tips which I know for a fact do work. So I hope it's been useful. All right, well, I'll let you guys go and enjoy your life. Bye all, really nice having you. All right, I'm gonna end the call now, but thanks always, and hopefully see you at the next webinar. We're doing a few on dyslexia and understanding the difference between verbal dyslexia and phonological dyslexia and visual dyslexia. So that'll be fun. Bye.